You wake to the smell of smoke. The night sky above is not dark but scarlet, painted with flames that devour the roofs of your village. Horses scream, children wail. The world has collapsed into chaos. Your wrists are bound with coarse rope, each tug slicing deeper into your skin. You are herded like an animal toward the village edge, stumbling with dozens of others under the watch of mounted men. The ground trembles under hooves. A wall of fur-clad riders looms over you, their faces hardened into masks of indifference. They do not see you as a person. To them, you are weight, trade, flesh, something to be assigned value, not dignity. One rider leans down, his eyes briefly locking with yours. The emptiness in them chills you more than fire ever could. Someone beside you cries out, begging for mercy. A quick thrust of a spear silences him. The body collapses into the dirt, smoke, curling around it before flames claim the last of its shape. You flinch, but the rope pulls you forward. Your legs give way. A whip lashes across your back, the sound cracking through the night like thunder. You stumble on, vision blurring. Ahead, a cart waits. The women inside are packed tightly together, their faces pale with terror. Some sob quietly. Others sit hollow-eyed, already broken. You are shoved in among them. The cart jolts forward, tossing bodies against one another. Through the gaps in the planks, you watch your world vanish. The painted shutters of your family's house, the courtyard where you once heard poetry recited. All of it is ash now. Song poets had promised a life of red sleeves adding fragrance to the night of study. But here, in the glare of Mongol conquest, sleeves are torn and perfumed chambers have burned to black rubble. The cart rattles. One woman whispers a prayer. Another, older, mutters in a hoarse voice, "Don't fight. Endure. Endurance is survival." You do not want to believe her. But when you catch the cold gaze of the riders circling the cart, you understand. Resistance means death. Submission means maybe, just maybe, another day alive. You remember stories from childhood, of loyal wives, praised in verse, of women whose modesty was celebrated by scholars. Those tales feel cruel now, like a mocking echo. Here, no one sees you as pure or chaste. Here, your value is not in poems, but in horses, traded at markets where your name will never be spoken again. The older woman closes her eyes. You realize she has surrendered her soul before her body is even taken. You press your face against your knees, wishing to vanish, to become invisible. But you cannot disappear. You are here, alive, and your fate is in the hands of men who laugh as if this night is a festival. When the cart lurches over stones, your head strikes the boards. For a moment, blackness offers mercy. Then pain drags you back. Around you, whispers weave with the clatter of hooves. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays, haunting and strange as though even music has been conscripted into the language of conquest. Your name feels fragile on your tongue. Will anyone remember it? Or will you become like so many others, faceless, nameless, remembered only in the numbers of spoils taken? You bite your lip until blood fills your mouth, hoping pain can anchor you. The night stretches on, and you realize, with terrible clarity, that the only way to survive is to accept becoming less than human. In Mongol conquest, women were livestock. Fire, rope, and hooves reduced human lives to transactions. A captured woman was not a daughter, not a wife, not even a person. She was a prize, a commodity to be traded for horses or silver. Contrast this with the poetic illusions of song literati. In their works, women appear as serene companions, delicate figures who complete the scholar's life. Sleeves adding fragrance, candles lighting gentle eyes. That was the imagined woman. But the Mongol battlefield mocked such ideals. The same woman who might have been praised in verse became, under conquest, a nameless captive with no agency. The disparity between poetry and reality exposes a truth. Culture romanticizes, but history brutalizes. Empires record the triumphs of conquerors while silencing the agony of their victims. The firelight that night did not only consume homes, it consumed illusions. Behind every empire's rise, there are countless women erased, their names lost, their suffering deemed unworthy of memory. Long before Temujin became Genghis Khan, the terror of nations, he was a boy shaped by loss and captivity. You are not yet the Khan of Khans. You are a boy standing in the cold steppe wind, your father newly poisoned by rivals, your family cast out from tribal protection. Hunger gnaws at your belly, fear gnaws deeper, yet the shadows shaping you are not only of politics and exile. They are shadows of women's fates, shadows that will seep into your reign. You hear your mother's voice at night. She tells you the story of how she was taken. Hoelun was riding with her first husband when Yesugei's men swooped down like hawks. They tore her away, dragging her by the reins, ignoring her husband's desperate cries. She became Yesugei's wife, not by choice, but by force. Her body transformed into a prize of war. You never forget this story. It is part of your inheritance, more than land or livestock. It whispers to you when the wind scours the tents. It teaches you that power decides intimacy, that women's fates are written by the strongest rider's hand. Years pass. You grow, hardened by hunger and betrayal, until you take a bride of your own, Berta, your chosen companion. She is young, yet strong-willed. For a brief moment, you believe her presence is a kind of peace, the first true comfort you have ever known. But the cycle repeats. The Merkits, enemies old and bitter, descend upon your camp. They carry Berta away, just as your mother was carried, years before. The night she disappears, you are no longer the boy abandoned on the steppe. You are a man hollowed out by rage, unable to protect the one person you dared to love. Days become weeks. Each morning, you wake with the taste of failure. Each night, you dream of her voice fading in the darkness. When you finally rescue her, she carries new life inside her. A child grows in her womb, and the whispers of doubt begin immediately. Is it yours? Or does his bloodline belong to the Merkits? When Jochi is born, you look into his face and see your own features, blurred with uncertainty. The boy grows to be strong, brave, a leader. Yet every time he enters your tent, the unspoken question follows him. To your allies, to your enemies, even to your descendants, his legitimacy is a wound that never heals, and still you cannot erase the truth. Both your mother and your wife, the two women who shaped your earliest years, bore children under the shadow of abduction. In their stories lies the truth of the steppe. Conquest is written first upon women's bodies before it is written on banners and maps. Imagine yourself as that child, listening to your mother tell her story, watching your wife return broken, yet unyielding. Imagine how these images burn into you, the ropes pulling her away, the cries echoing into the night, the uncertainty of bloodlines. These are not distant events. They are your inheritance. They are the forge in which your view of women, power, and conquest is hammered into steel. Later, as you carve an empire across Asia, your men will bring you wives and concubines from every land they conquer. To them, and perhaps to you, this feels natural, inevitable. But somewhere deep within, you know it is not simply lust or strategy. It is the repetition of a cycle that began before you drew your first breath. Your mother's stolen body, your wife's stolen body, your son's uncertain blood. These are the shadows behind the empire. Temujin's rise to power was shaped not only by war, but by women's suffering. Hoelun's abduction, Berta's capture, and Jochi's contested lineage show that even the great Khan's household was never free from the violence that defined his empire. What was practiced on the small scale of families became magnified into policy when conquest spread across continents. The contrast with medieval Europe is sharp but revealing. In the castles of France or England, noblewomen were married off for alliances, often against their will. Yet rarely were such unions created by outright abduction during open raids. The violence of politics was hidden behind ceremony, veiled by vows and contracts. In the steppe world, however, the veil was torn away. Power was exercised without pretense, women seized as clearly as horses or cattle. This difference exposes the Mongol Empire's brutal clarity. What was implicit elsewhere, women as tools of politics, was explicit here. The personal scars of Temujin's family became the pattern for the empire's future, where conquest and sexuality were bound together inseparably. By the early 13th century, Temujin was no longer a wandering outcast. He had gathered tribes under his banner, broken rivals, and proclaimed himself Genghis Khan. You step inside the Ordo, the royal encampment of Genghis Khan. At its center stands a great felt tent, massive enough to house dozens of people. The air smells of fermented mare's milk and smoke. Here, where decisions about war and tribute are made, you realize something startling. The harem is not hidden in shadow, but interwoven with the empire's machinery. 4 women sit in places of honor. Berta, the first and chief wife, commands respect. Her tent is treated as the central court, her words carrying weight in matters of household and state. Around her are the other senior wives, each given responsibility for managing sections of the nomadic empire. One oversees western lands, another controls grain supplies, another dispenses gifts to foreign envoys. The hierarchy is rigid. Wives are ranked, concubines are catalogued, and slaves are counted like livestock. Each woman has a role, whether she commands an estate, bears children, or simply serves at feasts. To belong to this harem is not to be loved, but to be used, an extension of the Khan's will. You sit quietly and listen to the movements around you. Officials come and go, delivering reports not only to generals, but to the senior wives. They are consulted about resources, about where herds should be moved, about which tribes should be rewarded with brides in exchange for loyalty. In the Mongol world, marriage is diplomacy, and women are the currency. At night, the reality deepens. Captives from distant campaigns are brought into the camp, their fates determined not by their wishes, but by their usefulness. Some are parceled out to warriors, rewards for loyalty. Others are absorbed into the Khan's harem, their names forgotten, replaced by titles that denote rank but erase individuality. The atmosphere is one of calculation, not tenderness. A woman's body is a treaty. A child she bears can become a prince. A smile or refusal can tip the balance of a tribal alliance. You begin to understand that the harem is less a sanctuary than a battlefield, a silent, continuous negotiation for survival, power, and recognition. The irony is hard to ignore. The steppe outside celebrates mobility, freedom, and ferocity. But inside the harem, immobility is enforced. Women are tethered by invisible ropes, their value measured by fertility, lineage, or the political advantage they can deliver. And yet, even within this system, power leaks through the cracks. Berta uses her authority to protect her sons and influence decisions. Other wives position their offspring as heirs, whispering to generals, forging ties with merchants, or securing alliances with lesser chiefs. Survival requires cunning. The harem is both a prison and a parliament, where silent strategies shape the empire's future. You, as the observer, realize that the empire's map is drawn not just in blood and conquest, but in marriages and children. The women here do not wield swords, but they shape destinies nonetheless. Every campaign, every treaty, every oath sworn on the steppe echoes through this tent. The Mongol harem demonstrates the stark mechanics of power. Women were integrated into statecraft not as partners, but as instruments. Their lives illustrate the empire's brutal pragmatism. Love or choice had no place in this structure. Utility was everything. In the Islamic caliphates, harems were also political spaces, but there women occasionally exercised real influence through patronage, poetry, or maternal authority. Some, like the mothers of Ottoman sultans, became formidable figures shaping succession. In contrast, the Mongol approach was rawer, more transactional. Captivity, exchange, and coercion were visible, unapologetic. This nakedness of intent is perhaps the most shocking feature of the Mongol system. Where other cultures cloaked control in ritual or religion, the Mongols displayed it plainly. A wife was an alliance, a concubine, a symbol of conquest, a slave, a unit of wealth. The empire's scale was immense, but at its heart lay a truth, both simple and devastating: the female body as a political machine. Persian historian Atamalik Juvayni, writing in the mid-13th century, described with brutal clarity how Mongol conquests turned human lives into commodities. You arrive in the ruins of a once thriving Persian town, its streets still blackened with smoke. The Mongol army has moved on, but the aftermath remains. The marketplace has been transformed into something darker, a bazaar of captives. You are pushed forward, herded like the others, until you find yourself beneath a canopy where men sit with ledgers. They appraise each woman brought before them, not as individuals but as categories: fair skin or noble blood, a higher price, older, worn from travel, worth less than a single mare, a child with wide eyes, valued for potential, not for humanity. The air buzzes with bargaining. One merchant offers 3 camels for a woman he claims has noble ancestry. Another counters with gold dinars. Bargains are struck quickly, coldly, as if trading hides or cloth. Each deal strips away identity, reducing a life to an equation. You hear the murmurs around you: this one for a stallion, that one for a hawk, too thin, half price. Your ears burn as you realize that you are not even considered human currency. You are stock, ranked against horses and birds of prey. A girl beside you whispers her name under her breath, as if clinging to it will save her. But when her turn comes, the scribe records nothing of it. He notes only her age, her complexion, her price. Her name disappears into the silence of history. The cruelty lies not only in the exchange, but in the indifference. Buyers do not sneer or gloat. They do not need to. Their calm efficiency makes the humiliation complete. To them, this is simply commerce. To you, it is the erasure of your existence. You catch sight of Mongol soldiers lingering nearby, laughing and tossing coins. They speak casually of which captives will be kept as rewards, which will be sent north, which will be gifted to allies. It dawns on you that your future will not be decided by your will, or even by your captor's desire, but by the cold logic of utility. The sun beats down on the market square, and with every transaction, another woman vanishes into anonymity. Some are loaded onto carts, bound for distant lands. Others are marched away in small groups, disappearing into the horizon like shadows. As night falls, you remain unsold, your worth debated but unresolved. The realization cuts deeper than chains. Your entire existence has been reduced to whether someone believes you are worth a horse, a purse of silver, or nothing at all. The slave markets of the Mongol Empire reveal the mechanics of dehumanization in its starkest form. Value was not intrinsic but imposed, determined by beauty, age, and perceived usefulness. To be alive was not enough. One had to be worth something to the buyer. In Rome, slavery was brutal, but records sometimes preserved the identities of enslaved individuals, marking them as artisans, teachers, or household members. In the Mongol world, many women disappeared into silence, unnamed, remembered only by their price. This anonymity is its own violence. What is most haunting is not the cruelty of one soldier or one buyer, but the normalization of the system. No anger, no outrage, just a marketplace. The ledger entries of Juvayni and others remind us that to history's victors, women were not daughters, sisters, or mothers. They were units, interchangeable and disposable. The Mongol Empire was built on conquest, but it was sustained by this machinery of commodification. And in that machinery, every you vanished into the pages of commerce, a shadow without a name. By the early 13th century, Mongol expansion was at its height. Cities across Central Asia and Eastern Europe trembled at the approach of the Khan's armies. The year is 1237. You stand among the citizens of Ryazan, a Russian city caught in the Mongol path. Snow lies heavy on rooftops, muffling sound, but the silence is unnatural. Fear has already arrived before the soldiers. When the Mongols break through the gates, their entry is not chaotic, but terrifyingly organized. Warriors ride in with deliberate purpose, their faces expressionless. Families cling to one another, praying that surrender might bring mercy. But mercy is absent. You see the young women gathered in the square, herded together as if they were livestock. Their parents scream, but the soldiers push them back with spears. Some are claimed instantly by commanders as trophies of victory. Others are dragged before the community, their fates made into performances. The message is unmistakable. Resistance leads not only to death but to humiliation so deep it scars generations. Later chronicles tell of even larger horrors. In the conquered Khwarezmian cities, women were seized en masse, sometimes traded on the spot for horses or armor. One chronicler describes marketplaces where the value of captives was casually debated, while families looked on helpless. Each transaction was both economic and symbolic, demonstrating that lives had been reduced to currency. Then comes the story of Ögedei Khan, successor to Genghis. In 1237, he ordered thousands of young women gathered during campaigns to be subjected to public degradation in front of their families. This was not a crime of passion, it was policy intended to annihilate the spirit of the conquered. Fathers and brothers who might have fought on found their courage extinguished when forced to watch their daughters violated. You imagine standing in that crowd. Your body shakes, not only from the cold, but from the horror of what unfolds. You want to look away, but the soldiers force you to witness, for that is part of the punishment. In their eyes, this is as essential to conquest as the burning of houses or the slaughter of warriors. And beyond these singular events, there is the slow, grinding attrition of humiliation. Survivors speak of being marched for weeks across frozen ground, tied together like animals. Along the way, those who falter are discarded. Women give birth on the roadside, their infants left behind, their cries fading into the wind. These acts are not hidden, they are made visible. The Mongols want stories of their cruelty to spread faster than their armies. By the time they reach the next city, terror has already softened defenses. Violence becomes rumor, and rumor becomes a weapon sharper than any sword. As you stand among the conquered, you realize this truth. The spectacle is designed not only to break bodies, but to crush memory itself, so that future generations inherit only fear. The brutality of Mongol campaigns has often been compared to other medieval atrocities. In Western Europe, the witch trials of the 15th and 16th centuries created spectacles of fear, but their victims were condemned as criminals. The Mongols, by contrast, targeted women not for alleged guilt, but for the simple fact of belonging to a conquered people. Public humiliation was weaponized on a scale rarely seen in other civilizations. What might elsewhere have been private became deliberately staged. The intent was psychological, to erase dignity, sever communal bonds, and ensure submission without prolonged warfare. Yet the paradox remains. The same empire capable of such devastation also established unprecedented trade routes and relative peace across Eurasia under the Pax Mongolica. But for the women whose lives were shattered, these achievements meant little. Their suffering was not collateral, it was deliberate, central to the Mongol project of domination. In this way, the Mongols' violence reveals a stark truth. Conquest is not only about armies and territory, but about the intimate destruction of human lives. The empire's legacy is therefore twofold: astonishing achievements of connectivity and unspeakable acts of cruelty etched into memory. Centuries later, historians turn to the secret history of the Mongols, the closest thing to an insider chronicle of Genghis Khan's life. You find yourself in a library centuries after the Mongol conquests, standing before a manuscript of the secret history. The pages are worn, ink faded, but the story is alive. It tells of Genghis Khan's childhood struggles, his military genius, his loyalty and betrayals. It sings praises of his sons and generals. But as you trace the words, you notice what is missing. Not a line about the women who marched in chains. Not a whisper of the girls whose lives were traded for horses. It is as if they never existed. Their silence is not natural. It has been constructed. You close the manuscript and imagine returning to the burning ruins of Nishapur, where chroniclers later claimed the massacre numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The men were slaughtered. The women were divided. Yet in Mongol sources, there is only mention of victory. For them, humiliation was not a tragedy, but a tool. Not a shameful act, but a fact too common to record. Centuries later, in Persian histories like Giovanni's History of the World Conqueror, fragments of truth appear. Giovanni writes with disgust of markets where women and children were sold, noting how prices fell because there were simply too many captives. A girl could be exchanged for a single garment, a boy for a pair of boots. This brutal economics reveals what official Mongol accounts omit. Lives reduced to commodities, worth no more than fabric. In Russia, monks recorded laments about nuns, assaulted in their convents, their holy spaces defiled. In China, bureaucrats carefully listed numbers of women sent as tribute to the Mongol court, each reduced to an entry in a ledger. These scattered voices, though far apart, share a theme. The empire's violence was not only military, but deeply personal. Yet official Mongol memory remains silent. Why? Because empire needs heroes, not ghosts. The chroniclers sought to elevate Genghis Khan as a lawgiver and unifier, not as the overseer of mass suffering. The silence itself became a kind of propaganda, ensuring that his image remained untarnished for posterity. As you flip through records, you realize how history is shaped not just by what is written, but by what is erased. For every chronicle praising Genghis as a man of destiny, there are countless unnamed women whose stories vanished into smoke. Their cries were carried away by the wind on the steppes, never inked onto parchment. And so you, as the reader, are left with fragments, numbers without names, markets without faces, ruins without voices. The legacy is not just conquest, but the deliberate forgetting of the conquered. The Mongol Empire's historical record shows how selective memory shapes our understanding of power. In Europe, tragedies like the fall of Troy or the lamentations of biblical women were immortalized in poetry and drama, giving victims a form of symbolic survival. In contrast, Mongol history largely erased women, treating their suffering as too trivial or too normal to record. This silence has consequences. For centuries, the Mongols were remembered primarily as military geniuses or empire builders. Only recently have historians pieced together the hidden cost, uncovering fragments from foreign sources to reconstruct what was deliberately omitted. The contrast is stark. European Renaissance art often transformed female suffering into tragic heroines. Mongol chronicles left no space for tragedy, only triumph. This absence reflects not only Mongol priorities, but the broader truth that victors often control memory. The victims fade, their erasure as devastating as their initial humiliation. Thus, the empire's legacy is twofold. It reshaped the world with trade routes and innovations, but it also reshaped memory itself, teaching us how easily suffering can vanish from official history. The silence of the Mongol records remains one of the most enduring cruelties of conquest. Modern genetic studies reveal that around 16 million men alive today carry a Y chromosome lineage traced back to one man, Genghis Khan. The steppe wind howls around you as you ride with the Mongol horde, their banners snapping in the air like predatory wings. You have survived the conquest of your town, endured the march across plains and rivers, and now you find yourself in a new kind of captivity. The Khan sits in his ger, surrounded not only by warriors, but by women taken from every corner of the world, Chinese, Persian, Russian, Korean. Each represents more than personal pleasure. Each is a symbol of submission, a token of conquest, and a vessel for legacy. You are told that to be chosen by the Khan or his generals is both an honor and a curse. Honor, because it raises you above the faceless slaves sold in markets. Curse, because your body is no longer your own. It becomes a political instrument, carrying within it the future heirs of empire. The system is calculated. Marriages are arranged with daughters of defeated rulers, binding conquered lands into the Mongol web of allegiance. Sons born from these unions secure loyalties. Daughters are exchanged again like coins to seal fresh alliances. What looks like desire is strategy disguised in flesh. You hear stories whispered among the women of Berta, the Khan's first wife, stolen in her youth and reclaimed by him after battle, of Chabi, the influential empress of Kublai Khan, who guided policies and mediated disputes. Yet these rare figures stand against a tide of countless others, women never named in chronicles, whose only record exists in the silent spread of Mongol genes across continents. In the candlelit gloom of the Ger, you watch as scribes record the genealogy of new heirs. Names are inscribed carefully, each line a thread binding Mongolia to distant territories. But for the women, there is no place. In the record, they are shadows behind the names, their suffering hidden behind dynastic successions. When you bear a child, the Mongols rejoice not for you but for the empire. Your son is claimed as a descendant of the Khan. Your daughter is promised to another warlord's house before she even takes her first steps. What should be family becomes geopolitics. The Khan himself views reproduction as a form of warfare more enduring than swords. Cities burn, but bloodlines persist. By spreading his lineage, he ensures that the empire is etched into the biological future of nations. And so, even as villages are reduced to ash, the empire multiplies invisibly within the wombs of the conquered. The horror is not in the moment alone, but in the permanence. You realize that your body carries not just a child, but a living signature of conquest, a mark that cannot be erased. Centuries from now, people who never knew your face will still carry the genetic echo of the Khan's ambition. And as you sit by the fire, clutching the child that is yours yet not yours, you understand the cruel genius of it. Empires fall, monuments crumble, but lineage persists. The Khan's strategy is not merely to rule the world of his time, but to inhabit the bodies of generations to come. This chapter of Mongol history reveals how conquest extended beyond battlefield victories into the realm of biology. The deliberate spread of lineage ensured that Genghis Khan's empire would outlive his armies. Unlike the Roman Empire, where adoption and cultural assimilation spread influence, the Mongols used physical reproduction as political consolidation. Modern DNA evidence is not myth but measurable fact. The Khan's genetic footprint covers vast swathes of Asia. For the conquered, this meant that personal identity was erased, transformed into an instrument of imperial expansion. What was intimacy elsewhere became policy here. Compared to later European colonizers who used intermarriage and mestizo identities to bind territories, the Mongols represent an earlier, starker version of biological domination. The female body was not metaphorically, but literally a weaponized frontier. The tragedy lies not only in individual suffering, but in historical silence. The women remain nameless, their stories unrecorded, yet their descendants walk among us today. Genghis Khan's strategy of desire is both a testament to his ruthless pragmatism and a haunting reminder of how empires can colonize not just land, but life itself. History often speaks of Mongol women with admiration. They could ride horses, manage households, trade in markets, and even influence politics. It is dawn on the open steppe. The sky stretches endlessly, painted in hues of orange and gold as the sun rises. You ride with a group of Mongol women, their figures strong and upright on horseback. Their braids whip in the wind, their bows slung casually across their backs. These women laugh freely, speaking openly in the company of men, their confidence unmistakable. Here, among their own people, Mongol women enjoy a kind of respect rare in the medieval world. They are guardians of the household when warriors depart, on campaigns. They barter in markets, manage herds, and direct servants. Some, like Berta, Genghis Khan's first wife, or Sorghaghtani Beki, mother of great Khans, wield real political influence. Their voices are heard in councils. Their decisions shape families and sometimes whole campaigns. Now the scene shifts. You are not one of them, but a foreign woman dragged into this same encampment after a raid. Your wrists are raw from the ropes that bound you during the long march. The laughter of the Mongol women sounds different to you, alien, even mocking, as you crouch on the ground in your torn dress. You are not a participant in this society, only a shadow. While Mongol women walk into the market to trade silk and spices, you are offered for barter, your value determined not by skill, but by appearance. To them, you are currency, exchangeable like a sheep or a horse. One Mongol matron orders you to carry water. Another commands you to mend clothing. Their tone is not cruel, but matter of fact. You realize that in this world, hierarchy is not only men over women, it is Mongol women over captive women. The freedom they enjoy is built, in part, on your subjugation. At night, you watch them gather around the fire, telling stories of ancestors and heroic deeds. You too once had stories, songs from your homeland, memories of your family. But here, those have no place. Your voice is silenced, your identity swallowed into anonymity. You are expected to serve without protest, to accept your namelessness. The bitter irony unfolds before your eyes. The empire celebrates its women as bold and independent, capable of shaping destiny. But you, a woman from conquered lands, are denied even the smallest autonomy. To be born Mongol is to inherit the possibility of freedom. To be captured by Mongols is to inherit chains. You feel the paradox sharply. Women who are praised in chronicles for their strength are also the ones who command your silence. Their empowerment is tied to your erasure. The empire that lifts them up crushes you down, and no one records your name. The Mongol Empire presents a striking contradiction. Within their own communities, Mongol women were celebrated for their abilities. They could own property, influence decisions, and even rule in times of crisis. Compared to their European contemporaries, they enjoyed remarkable freedoms. Far more than noble women confined to castles or common women bound to households. Yet this empowerment did not extend to all women. Captives bore the brunt of conquest, stripped of names, rights, and dignity. Their fate was to serve, reproduce, or be sold. The empire's progressive treatment of its own women coexisted with brutal disregard for the humanity of others. This paradox highlights a central truth about empires. Privileges are rarely universal. The liberation of one group often rests upon the oppression of another. In the Mongol case, the free steppe woman and the enslaved captive lived side by side, their destinies diverging not by choice or merit, but by birth and conquest. It is a sobering reminder that historical admiration for Mongol women must be tempered by acknowledgement of those who had no voice, the countless women who sustained the empire not by choice, but by compulsion. History often feels distant. Battles, maps, names carved into stone. But step closer and the story narrows until it reaches you. Imagine being not the conqueror, not the chronicler, but the nameless figure history ignored. You might have been a girl taken from her village, a wife traded for a horse, or a mother whose child never returned. In the chronicles, you vanish. In reality, you endure. This final chapter is not about empires or khans. It is about the small, fragile human, you, left behind, the one history refused to name. You are 12 years old when the horsemen arrive. The ground shakes beneath their hooves, the night filled with firelight. Your village is ash before dawn, your father gone, your brothers dragged away. You are tied to the saddle of a man who does not speak your tongue, your wrists rubbed raw, by rope. You learn quickly that screaming makes no difference. You are sold in a market days later. The smell of horses and sweat fills the air, and the trader lifts your chin as if inspecting an animal. A man offers 3 coins and a cloak. That is the value placed upon your body. No one asks your name. Years pass, and you live as shadow. Perhaps you serve in a nomad's tent, perhaps in a palace's outer quarters. You bear children whose fathers you never chose, and they grow up calling someone else master. You wonder sometimes if they will know that half of their blood carries the memory of fire and screams. But you say nothing, because silence is the only shield left to you. One day, as you grind grain in a corner of the camp, you overhear men praising Genghis Khan. They speak of his wisdom, his courage, his law. They call him a bringer of order. For them, he is destiny made flesh. For you, he is the horseman who took everything. The same name, 2 meanings. Glory for them, silence for you. And as the years stretch into decades, you vanish further. Your body ages, your hair grays, your face hardens. The people who once knew you are gone. The children you bore do not remember. Your language. By the time you are 50, you are no one. No records, no tombstone, no epic poem. Just a body that lived, endured, and was forgotten. Yet imagine, for one moment, that you are not forgotten. Imagine that your life, fragile as it was, has been carried across centuries, whispered between the lines of chronicles that never named you. Imagine that each statistic, 10,000 taken, women divided among the soldiers, was, in fact, you. A singular human folded into faceless numbers. This is the cruelest truth. History did not erase you because you were unimportant, but because empires needed you silent. Silence kept the conquerors untarnished, the Khans unblemished, the heroes pure. Your story, if spoken, would expose the empire not as glorious, but as monstrous. So silence became policy, and you became invisible. But tonight, in this retelling, your voice returns. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. Enough for listeners to remember that behind every line of conquest was someone like you, whose story was never meant to survive. Enough to remind us that empires rise on bones and silence, and the silence itself becomes part of the violence. Returning to you, the forgotten victim, forces us to confront the human cost beneath the grandeur of empire. Genghis Khan is remembered as a unifier, a military genius, even as a visionary. Yet the very same empire built its foundations on thousands of silenced voices. European chronicles often preserved at least the memory of women through legend. Helen of Troy, Joan of Arc, even tragic queens remembered by name. The Mongol record, by contrast, erased them wholesale. No laments, no tragedies, no monuments, only silence. This contrast is not accidental. It shows how history can be shaped not just by victories, but by omissions. What survives on parchment is not always what truly mattered. The women whose lives were consumed by conquest carried the empire's hidden weight, but the world was not meant to remember them. By speaking in the second person, by returning to you, we resist that silence. We restore a fragment of dignity, however small. The legacy of Genghis Khan is not only measured in borders or dynasties, but also in the unmarked graves and erased names of those who lived beneath his shadow. History celebrates the Khan, but history also belongs to you. Every empire leaves behind monuments, laws, and songs of victory. But there is another inheritance, quieter and heavier: silence. When we speak of Genghis Khan, we often speak of power, conquest, and strategy. Yet what is not spoken, the silenced voices of those taken, traded, and erased, shapes our understanding just as much. This chapter is not about battles or leaders. It is about what remains unsaid, what hangs in the air between the lines of history, pressing on us like an invisible weight. You walk through the ruins of Karakoram, centuries after the Mongol Empire has crumbled. The wind carries dust over stones where palaces once stood. Tourists see grandeur. Archaeologists uncover trade routes. Historians read inscriptions. But if you close your eyes, you hear something else. The silence of those who were never recorded. VI chronicles describe the great Khans, Ogadai, Mungke, Kublai, expanding their dominion, shaping Asia and Europe alike. They speak of cavalry, diplomacy, taxation, and law. But beneath these victories lie countless stories like yours, unnamed, women, faceless captives, forgotten children. The empire could not have existed without you, yet it chose to pretend you never existed at all. Silence becomes its own kind of monument. It is everywhere. In the gaps of the secret history of the Mongols, in the lines skipped by Persian chroniclers, in the echoes absent from Chinese records, the silence whispers that conquest was clean, that order was achieved without cost. But you know the truth. Every order imposed was written in the language of fear, every law enforced at the expense of someone's freedom, every dynasty secured through the wombs of the nameless. Centuries pass and the world changes. New empires rise and fall, yet silence persists. It is passed down like inheritance, carried within family lines that no longer remember the stories, but still bear their consequences in blood and bone. The Mongols claimed territory with horses and arrows, but they secured legacy with something quieter. The silenced lives of millions, transformed into faceless numbers, their stories dissolved into nothing. And here you stand, in the present, trying to recover fragments. You search chronicles, DNA studies, stray mentions in letters. You reconstruct what you can. A scholar notes that 16 million men carry Genghis Khan's genetic marker. A Persian historian recalls women distributed like livestock. A Chinese account hints at markets where captives were sold. Together, they form a collage, not complete, not whole, but enough to glimpse the shadow behind the empire's light. That is the paradox. Silence can never fully hide truth. Fragments always escape. And with every retelling, every recovered voice, silence is weakened. You become not just a victim, but a testimony. Even without names, your endurance speaks louder than the chronicles that sought to erase you. Empires are remembered for their monuments. Rome left the Colosseum. China left the Great Wall. The Mongols left borders that shaped Eurasia. But beyond bricks and stones, what survives is silence, the deliberate forgetting of those who suffered. In Europe, tragedies like witch hunts or inquisitions still left behind names of the accused. In Mongol records, silence swallowed even that. No list of women, no record of the enslaved, no epitaph carved for those who bore the empire's hidden cost. Yet this silence is not empty. It forces us to ask harder questions. Who benefits when history forgets? Who decides which lives are worth remembering? By confronting silence, we confront the very structure of power. Genghis Khan's violence shaped the world, but so too did the forgotten resilience of those beneath him. Their silence is not only absence, it is the shadow that defines the light. And by breaking it, even centuries later, we remind ourselves that history belongs not just to conquerors, but to the conquered. Not just to names etched in stone, but to those erased entirely. The empire is gone. The silence remains, but so does the choice to listen.